Welcome, brothers and sisters. My name is Eros and I am the Doll Maker. Also, welcome to this new series in which we will talk about the planets one by one to try and get a better understanding, a better feel of the sensation, of the energy of every single planet. Don't worry, we won't get excessively deep. We will talk only about the main correspondences to get this better feel about every single planet. And as you guessed from the title, we will start with Saturn. Saturn, first of all, talks us about boundaries. It's telling us to define boundaries and respect boundaries, either the boundaries of others, but especially respecting our self boundaries. So, in a sense, Saturn is telling us to have a strong inner structure. Saturn wants us to understand what we are ready to do and when we are ready to do it, and what we will never do, what we are not ready to do, and to don't do that. Also, Saturn is telling us to respect spaces, other personal spaces, but especially our personal space, and what we include in our personal space. At the same time, on a different note, Saturn is also telling us to take space and time for ourselves and for others we are bonded with, for those we love. The second correspondence we will take into consideration about Saturn is authority. The authority to banish, to push away, forgive me, and the authority to bind, if we want to do so. So, this is best expressed in the authority of the magician, and in our practice is best expressed in the authority that we put into our rituals, magical rituals, of course. So, Saturn is reminding us to use the right application of authority. So, we want to be firm, but not excessive in the pressure that we put into our authority. Saturn is reminding us of our right to choose rightfully for what we want to do and when we want to do that, and not be simply dragged around by emotion. Saturn is a very strict planet. The third correspondence we will talk about is structure, as you guessed. So Saturn is telling us about the necessity of keeping order and the importance that we can get from efficiency through order and ordering ourselves, our life. The necessity of order and cleanliness, in a sense, in our body, in our mind, and in our spirit, but also in our, in a sense, inner and outer space. So, Saturn is reminding us through these correspondence of structure and structuring that we need to take some time for ourselves to be alone and meditate. Also, sometimes simply taking some alone time some time to be alone. Forgive my English. Also, structure in this sense, through Satan, is extremely important to be applied to our physical properties of any sort. So, summarizing everything, Satan wants to teach us about discipline, to be rigorous in our daily life, and when we want to actually achieve something. So, through discipline, Satan is telling us how to forge habits and how to follow up with action our habits and our magical walking. Satan is telling us how to stay in our path, and especially that we need to stay in our path, following up with action, never lasting for results, because lust kills results. On the opposite side, Satan is also telling us that we always need to stand up after we've failed, because inevitably someday we will fail on something. The other side of the coin, in this sense, that through discipline, Satan is teaching us, is knowing when to walk away from a situation and from a person if we need to do so. In this sense, discipline, the discipline that Satan is teaching us is also extremely important in our daily life. For example, if we need to stay on a diet, or when we want to go to the gym. Now, as we said before, forgive me, Satan is clearly represented in an object which is the scepter or the rod, if you want to call it this way. Best represented in the cards of the emperor or the empress, also depending on what deck you use for your readings. So the scepter represents, as we've said before, the authority, the role that we have in our daily life and in our community. Satan is telling us to enforce our role, especially towards ourselves, taking consideration what we are responsible for, or in a sense, keeping in hand our scepter for those we are responsible for, not only ourselves. So, through the image of the scepter, we also have the understanding that we need to know when we need to be an emblem, when we need to be an icon for those around us, or even ourselves. Being an institution, and eventually, unfortunately, also knowing when and if to strike, if we need to do so. Because, of course, Satan is one of the two benefic planets. Now, let's try to do a mind game through analogy. We will take the personality traits of Satan in balance and of Satan out of balance. Now, the personality trait of Satan in balance is, of course, the ruler. while Satan, out of balance, is best represented on the tyrant. So, the ruler is authoritative, while on the opposite side, the tyrant is oppressive, is not expressing authority, is pushing down others to rise. The ruler is determined in his action and his choices, while the tyrant is controlling in everything that surrounds him and wants to be in control of other choices and every factor. The ruler is wise through experience, while the tyrant is arrogant in every experience he makes. That I know everything approach that we sometimes see in some people. The ruler is disciplined, while the tyrant has impossible standards, especially on others, but sometimes even the tyrant is even in a sense pushed to have impossible standards about himself or herself. If you ever knew someone who has a eating disorder, you know what I'm talking about. Then the ruler is ready to lead himself and other people. The tyrant, on the other side, is ready to use other people. The ruler is led by principles and ready to lead other people by his or her principle. On the opposite side, the tyrant is led by greed. In a last note, if you want to summarize everything together, the ruler is stoic, remain solid in the face of adversity, while the tyrant is static. He always tries to keep the status quo. Now, as always, let's start with some correspondences, direct correspondences for your magic. And we can clearly tell that for Saturn, that the color is black. The day is, of course, Saturday. The tarot card that best represents Saturn is the universe or the world, if you use a different deck from mine. And from a zodiacal point of view, Saturn is represented in the sign of Aquarius during the day and in the sign of Capricorn during the night. The metal that best represents Saturn is lead. And if you want to have a few crystals that works, in my experience, really well for Saturn, if you want to work with Saturn, you may want to use obsidian, onyx, or tourmaline, especially black tourmaline. Talking about herbs, as we've seen before, for Saturn we can work with parsley, pine, aloe, cumin, ivy, but also ginseng, patchouli, hierba santa, fumitory, comfrey, and if you want, you can also work with spruce and High John the Conqueror. Now, I hope this lesson was clear. I hope you get a better understanding of Saturn, at least a little bit more feel for Satan. As always, I deeply thank you for your kind attention. I hope I will see you in the next video, and may eternal light shine.